Okay, hello chess players. Today we're going to be taking a look at an opening. We're going to be taking a look at the Queen's Gambit accepted, beginning with d4, d5, pawn to c4, and then black accepts the Queen's Gambit. He plays pawn captures pawn. So anyways, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button, click your notification icon. So this video, I kind of want to ask the question, does the Queen's Gambit accepted just equalize? And does it equalize easily? Which sort of puts into question, like, all of my opening choices for my entire life. Like, if it equalizes easily and it equalizes as easily as it seems, like, why isn't everybody just playing the Queen's Gambit accepted? Why have I studied other openings? Why have I studied the Queen's Gambit declined? Why did I do a whole video series on it? Why aren't I just playing, the Queen's Gambit accepted instead of learning about the Slav or the Queen's Gambit declined or the Nimzo Indian or even the King's Indian? So does it equalize really easily? Well, the reason I'm asking that question is because there was this game played recently in the candidates that really got me thinking about it. It was Nakamura versus Gukesh in the candidates tournament. And it continued after d takes c4, it continued knight f3, which I was always told was sort of the best move in the position, or one of the main lines, because it prevents the counterplay that black could get by playing pawn to e5. So you play knight to f3, and then after knight f6, you play e3 with just the idea of harvesting this pawn on c4. And then after e6, you play bishop takes c4. And here, Gukesh played something that I thought was silly, but he equalized. And he equalized easily. And this got me really thinking about the Queen's Gambit accepted. Like, why haven't I been playing this my whole life, So he played bishop e7. Now, the reason this is weird is because most people will try to play c5 with the bishop still on f8 so that they don't lose a tempo if white takes. But Gukesh just didn't care. He played bishop e7, and after knight c3, he just played c5. And he says, I have no problem two-stepping my bishop e7, bishop c5. So here he is losing the tempo in the Queen's Gambit accepted, and throughout the course of the next couple moves, manages to equalize seemingly without a fight. The game continued a3, and then we had we had castles, a6, queen to e2, b5, bishop back to a2, and then exchange. So we have our isolated queen pawn opening, but then bam, pawn to b4. The best move according to the engine, and also completely equal right here, and on top of that, it completely equalizes by force, apparently in every line. Nakamura played knight e4, we had b takes e3, and bishop b7 was dead equal according to the engine, and Gukesh proved that it was nearly impossible for white to get anything out of this at all. Nakamura tried really hard, couldn't get anything out of it, the position's completely dead equal. So this got me thinking, this position is this dead equal, and Gukesh seemingly just lost a tempo in the opening and still equalized without a fight. So what's going on here? After the game was over with, everybody was criticizing Nakamura. Actually, they were criticizing him just for playing d4, which is insane. I mean, is d4 just a draw? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But if you go back and you look at it and you start analyzing the Queen's Gambit accepted, and you start analyzing even just the game, after, say, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop takes c4, bishop e7, knight c3, c5, Nakamura criticized this move a3 as an inaccuracy. I think we need to be a little bit harsher than that. I think it's just a mistake. Because this move a3 is really what's allowing the whole equalizing maneuver with a6, b5, and b4. And the reason that it equalizes so easily is because a3 becomes a target to the bishop on e7. So if we had to measure up the moves, like which move was worse, bishop e7 or a3, a3 is definitely a worse inclusion than bishop e7, because bishop e7 is only a two-step if white intends to play pawn captures pawn and exchange queens. And of course, Nakamura was in a must-win situation. He wanted to keep those queens on the board and keep life in the position so that he could have more chances to win. So he just wanted a normal IQP. If he wanted a normal IQP, he just should have castled. So he should have castled, queen e2, takes, and gotten a normal IQP this way. And after a6, he could have just played rook d1, which is the normal move, b5, bishop b3, bishop b7. Bishop f4 is slight edge white, according to the engine. It's not clear that black equalizes. You still have your IQP, but it's not clear if black equalizes or how black equalizes. But, this still made me think a little bit more. It's still an isolated queen pawn position. The position looks similar to the position that Gukesh had. What if you can just guarantee getting a position like this? every single time with the Queen's Gambit accepted. Does it still put all of my opening choices into question? Should I still have just been studying only the Queen's Gambit accepted my whole life? I could have just been working on just this position and learning how to play this position with the black pieces and getting it so well mastered that even though white has a very slight edge, I'm just going to get a draw every single time, and there's just no point in even playing the white pieces against me because you know that the position's just going to be equal and you're just going to get a draw. So why not just do this every time with black? So that got me looking at the Queen's Gambit accepted a little bit more and wondering, like, do I have to play chess like this if I want to play the white pieces? So it got me going back and looking at some assumptions that I've made about the Queen's Gambit accepted, sort of my whole life. Like when I was a kid, I was always told, okay, this is the most tempting beginner move, is e4. Because you're taking the whole center of the board, you're preparing to play bishop captures c4, it's the most tempting beginner move, but I was always told that when you got better, like at the highest levels, you didn't really want to do this because then black could play e5, and e5 could equalize, is what I was always told, is that e5 could equalize, and it could equalize relatively easily, and that's why you're supposed to play knight f3 to prevent e5. But if you play e4 and they play e5, it's not easy equality. And actually, there are plenty of top players that play e4 and allow e5. Ding Liren is one of them, our current world champion. He's one of them. He plays e4, and of course, we're going to probably see this in the match that's coming up between Ding Liren and Gukesh. We're going to see Ding Liren probably essay e4 against Gukesh's Queen's Gambit accepted. So those games are actually going to be kind of interesting, and I'm actually looking forward to them. But e4, e5, it's not so clear that this is equal. Now, of course, if we play, beginner moves, if we play dk c5, queen takes queen, king takes queen, knight c6, it's just advantage black. And of course, anything similar, like if we advance our pawn, this is also advantage black. Knight f6, knight c3, b5 is advantage black. But what you can play here is you can play this move knight to f3. This is actually advantage white. Actually, according to the engine, loves it. After knight to f3, e captures d4, bishop takes c4, and then we'll just say knight to c6 because we have to hold the pawn on d4. White has gambited a pawn in this position, and the positions are very similar to things you would see out of double e-pawn openings. So you might walk up to the board and think, oh, maybe this was a double e-pawn opening where white sacrificed his c-pawn somehow. You'd see positions similar to this in like a Max Lang attack, or in a Scotch Gambit, or in something like out of the Italian game. So if you're an e4 player and you're converting to d4, this is actually pretty appealing, and there's a lot of crossover in ideas as well. So castle's kingside is one of the theoretical moves, bishop c5, and then knight g5. We're actually following a pair of Ding Liren versus Mamanjarov games, both of which were played back in 2021, that continued with knight h6, knight takes f7, knight takes f7, bishop f7, king f7, queen h5. There's actually also a thematic idea that comes up in the Italian game as well, so kind of a cutesy idea that has some crossover into the Queen's Gambit accepted. So g6 and then queen takes c5. According to the engine, this is actually major advantage white. And Ding Liren played this twice against Mamanjarov. He drew one game and he won another one. So he did manage to win at least once. After rook e8, one of the games continued with bishop g5, and this is actually the game that ended in a draw. And another game continued with f3, and Ding Liren went on to win. But just to give you kind of an idea of what's happening, is after the bishop g5 move, we had Mamanjarov play queen d6, and then we had this exchange. We had knight d2, bishop e6, and then black tries to equalize in the middle of the board, but white gets enough counterplay, and you end up with this endgame, where black is clearly a little bit worse. It is an endgame, but black is clearly worse. Black has the split pawns. You have the opposite colored bishops, but black's king is a lot more airy than white's king, and that means that white's going to get a ton of counterplay, especially on the 7th rank and against black's loose pawns and against black's advanced pawns. So we have h3 making luft, we have h5, rook d1, and then Ding Liren goes after these pawns, and up until here he's doing really good, and then he makes this one mistake in the game that allows for a draw. He plays rook on d to b4, and eventually Mamanjarov goes on to draw, but he could have just played rook a7, and apparently white has nearly a decisive advantage according to the engine. White should just be almost winning in this position. So this pawn to e4 followed by, after e5, knight to f3 is very appealing. And it's something that you can play against the Queen's Gambit accepted that's not this knight f3 line. Now, of course, you can still play the knight f3 line. You can get a normal IQP like Nakamura should have gotten against Gukesh without black having the ability to get easy equality. But e4 is this other possibility that allows you to get these advantages that are very similar to double e-pawn openings. Now, of course, you have to know a little bit of theory. They can play something else. They could, of course, play knight f6. And then this is just similar to an Alekhine's defense. You can play e5, knight d5, and then bishop takes c4. And here, I'm actually following a couple Ali Reza Firouzja games. He played 2 games against Magnus Carlsen that I'm looking at here. He managed to win one of those games, and he managed to lose one of those games. So they went in both directions, but you can get to a position just like this from, this is very similar to something you would see out of an Alekhine's defense. So again, if you're an e4 player converting to d4, it makes a lot of sense to play something like this. You should already be familiar with the positions. The positions are by no means dead draws. It doesn't equalize without a fight. Clearly, white's a little bit better here. It's a position that could go both ways. So you can play these positions, you can play chess from here, you can get good games, and you can continue to fight. So I'm not planning on taking up the Queen's Gambit Accepted anytime soon. I am planning on taking a much closer look at e4 as an option against the Queen's Gambit Accepted. And of course, I don't feel like we need to give up on the main line with knight f3. I feel like we just need to be very careful about how we handle our queen side, and we need to make sure we get into that IQP. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess. I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.